My name is Najnaoui. I'm a study abroad peer advisor here in the International Center, and I'm also a graduate student in the University of Michigan School of Social Work. So just to clarify, the focus of this meeting is really short-term summer opportunities, internships and volunteering abroad in Spanish-speaking countries. And just so you guys know, this was in the email as well, most of these opportunities are unpaid. And that's something all of our panelists are going to talk a little bit more about. There's a lot of unique aspects to working in a Spanish-speaking country, especially cultural and linguistic differences. So we've also asked our panelists to talk a little bit about those challenges as well. And as you can see, we have a really wonderful panel here today. They have a really diverse array of experiences in Spanish-speaking countries. And before we get started with the panel, we're going to have Gabrielle just give a brief overview of interning versus volunteering in Spanish-speaking countries. Gabrielle?
Okay, hi everyone. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Gabrielle. I'm also a graduate student peer advisor in the International Center Education Abroad office. Okay, so what I'm going to tell you about today are just two basic binaries to think about when you're planning your trip abroad. So the first is whether you go with a program or whether you self-arrange an experience. So if you're going with a program, obviously there's going to be a program fee, and so a lot of people think, well, that's pretty expensive, I bet I can do it cheaper myself. A lot of times they don't realize that actually the program fee covers things like meals, and housing, quality housing, and orientation, a safety net that you might not otherwise have if you do it on your own. So that's just one thing to keep in mind, that the program really can offer a lot of advantages to doing a self-arranged internship or volunteer opportunity. Another thing that people worry about when going with a program is, well, will I actually be doing anything? Will I actually be working with the people there, with the community there? And the answer is yes. There's a reason that the program has been in existence for any extended period of time, and that's because they have a good relationship with the community that they work with and the people that in country that trust them and trust them to bring quality volunteers to them each year. So I would say you actually have better access in many cases to a community that you might be able to help with a program versus on your own. So those are just a few things to keep in mind, and overall a program really just offers a safety net like I mentioned before. So say something, whether it's just something with the country's government or something that you personally plan that doesn't quite go as you hoped, they are there to help you change your plan or notify people at home for you, or just check on you, hey, there was an earthquake, are you okay, that kind of thing. So those are some advantages to think about. And all of the panelists today will be presenting on their own programs that they went with, so I'm sure they'll be able to give you more detailed information about what their program offered. Oftentimes there'll be excursions and that kind of thing too, so just something to keep in mind. The second binary is volunteering versus interning, which is what Sarah had mentioned before as well. So volunteering, a lot of times we like to think of it as working directly with the target population of the organization. So when you volunteer, say in Latin America, you might be working directly with an underserved population, an oppressed population, a marginalized population, so working directly with the target population of the organization. When you intern, you might instead be working with the professionals of the organization, so working with the director, working with various internal entities like the finance office or writing grants, that kind of thing. So that's just the basic way to think of it. A lot of times there's overlap there. A lot of smaller organizations will have their volunteers working right alongside their director. So then how are you supposed to tell? It's probably both. You're volunteering at the same time, you're getting internship experience in that you're working with that professional. Perhaps you hope to have their position one day, and you're making all these great contacts at the same time. So oftentimes the line blurs a lot, but I would say that just generally to keep in mind that binary of working directly in the field versus working with professionals in a field that you hope to achieve one day. And now we'll
Hi guys, I'm Carl. I'm a senior in the Ford School of Public Policy. Like you just said, I secured an internship with CDS International in Buenos Aires, Argentina 2 summers ago. CDS is basically an internship placement program. And so basically you go through this application, which isn't very rigorous. It's a couple essays, you get a recommendation. And then you sort of coordinate with CDS, talk to them about your interests. And they, at least in my case, they worked with an affiliate corporation or company in Argentina that placed us with local NGOs or what have you. In terms of the program fee, it's not too much. I can't really remember, but I think it was between $1,000 and $2,000 for the summer, but they offered funding opportunities. Obviously, you have to pay for your living expenses. And in terms of my living arrangement, I actually lived in a residence with other CDS interns and a bunch of other youth volunteers from around the world. So I thought it was a really great opportunity, but you could have also lived with a host family. I know a lot of people that did that and really enjoyed it as well. Again, there's a small price differential between living with a host family, which I think was a little bit less expensive than the residence, but you've definitely got options there. Once I got to Argentina, I actually took 2 weeks of language training with that affiliate company. It was called CoinEd. So they kind of showed us the ropes of Buenos Aires and gave us basic language training, and there were people there from, you know, totally intro-level Spanish, and I'd had some experience already, so the classes did help. But after those 2 weeks, I was placed with a nonprofit, which is called La Usina, and they basically, like an advocacy group that works to promote civil and social justice for people with disabilities in Argentina. And while I didn't really get to work with that whole advocacy network that the organization had. I focused on grant funding, or finding grant opportunities. And so what I did was I basically researched embassies, international donors, places like the Soros Foundation, who were offering funding for the types of programs that my nonprofit was looking to carry out. And once I found those opportunities, I consulted with a small staff. I also worked with some other volunteers from, one girl was from Switzerland, Brazil, and another guy was from the US, because the organization actually partnered with ISEC as well. So I got to work both with a small staff of locals and other volunteers. So we worked together, found out which grants were appropriate for the organization. I worked to translate, format them, and submit them. I guess, let's see what's next. In terms of the language at work, like I said, I'd had some pretty solid experience both here at Michigan, and I'd also volunteered in Costa Rica previously. So I got to speak a lot of Spanish at work, but there were definitely other CDS interns who either knew little or no Spanish at all. The CoinEd program offered 4-week language training, so you could, you know, sort of ease into your internship a little bit more if you didn't know as much Spanish. And I know that people didn't really struggle. They were able to communicate pretty easily. There was usually someone in the office who knew some English. So that wasn't really a problem. But I definitely learned a whole lot. I would say I'm pretty proficient now. Having spoken it, you know, every day at work, it just almost becomes second nature by the end of the experience. Let's see if I left anything else out. They asked us to give you guys advice. I would say start looking now. A lot of applications are due in like late November and things like that. And the earlier you apply, the better chance you usually have of getting in. I would look at the International Center. I mean, there are tons of opportunities here, both for funding and for finding additional opportunities.
Yes, hello, my name is Sarah Morgan. I am a psychology major and I am a senior. I did my study abroad last summer, as she said, in Spain through CDS International. I think my cost for applying and so forth was around $600 to $700. And as he said, you know, it's an unpaid internship, but when they do have scholarships available, and I was lucky enough to get at least, I think, $800 in scholarship money. So, I mean, that really adds up when you're having to pay for housing and stuff like that. So virtually it's like getting paid for an internship, but you should look into ones that offer scholarships, definitely. I worked in Madrid, in the capital, the center of Spain. The center I worked at was right outside, so I had to commute a little bit, but I worked at a center it's called Hispano Peruano. It's a center for immigrating immigrants into the community, which was a great experience, something I really didn't think I was going to have an internship in. And it's a center that offered all sorts of free courses for immigrants as well as people from Spain. And within that, I was teaching English to adolescents and adults, and I also helped work in a summer camp for the immigrant kids. And overall, I mean, it was a really great experience in that sense, because I got to interact with the community and people that you know, were less fortunate, and a lot of the immigrants were very impoverished and so forth, as well as work with the communications director at the center and really learn how a center like that functions. They do not give you living arrangements ahead of time, which was one of the things I was a little flustered about in the beginning. But they do give you a lot of really good resources for how to find housing, and as he said, you can live with other people. I just found housing online, and I ended up living with about 5 or 6 other students, most of them from France or so forth, around my age. And living situation is a key point when you're looking into it, because you know, those were the people I became friends with and showed me around Spain, and really affected your experience, I feel like, quite a bit. And let's see, mostly when I got there, I did lots of traveling. The program was pretty small. There were only about 10 people in my program, and I did actually still stay in contact with 2 of them, and did lots of traveling on the weekends, and just really got to know the culture in Spain really well. And I took 6 years of Spanish before going. I did feel like I was proficient, but once I got there, you know, I realized once trying to communicate is a whole different affect, and going there not being able to communicate that well within a few weeks, you really pick it up quickly. In my setting, I only spoke Spanish pretty much for 3 months, which I really enjoyed. At times it was a struggle trying to communicate, but everybody that you work with was really understanding. Even the immigrants, when I was receptionist, you know, they were very understanding of the idea that it wasn't my native language and so forth. But I really enjoyed the fact that I wasn't able to speak English, because that really forced you to really learn the language. And even in my house and everything, the people I lived with spoke English, but we all spoke Spanish. Or even to practice with your, you know, people from the program on the weekends, we'd try to practice Spanish just to help with the language. But at first it was a little intimidating having to only speak Spanish, but since then you know, it's a really great way to learn and pick up the language. Any advice, if you're planning, I mean, if you guys are planning on doing something abroad, definitely take the effort to do it, because it was probably one of the best experiences I've had. I had always planned on doing study abroad, but once I found CDS International and realized you could do internship, and the experience I overall got from that was really life-changing. So I definitely recommend going to find an internship or volunteer.
So my name is Kevin Carney. I'm in LSA, concentrating in international studies, and I'm a junior. I spent the last summer working for 10 weeks in Managua, Nicaragua, at the U.S. Embassy there. The program is basically, the State Department has this pretty large internship program set up for undergraduate and graduate students at pretty much probably all of the embassies and diplomatic missions around the world. So there were interns just like me working anywhere else you can imagine. In terms of cost, most of the internships are unpaid. They have some paid internships and it's based on financial need, but mine ended up being unpaid. In terms of cost of the program, however, there weren't any program costs. For housing, I didn't have to pay for housing because during the summer is when people are kind of moving around, actual diplomats that work for the Department of State. So there are a lot of openings in housing, and I was placed in a house that was just happened to be vacant at that point in time. And some of the other interns were in a group of apartments that were together. So that's how that worked, and I didn't have to pay for that. All that I really had to cover the cost for was my airfare there and just the cost of living for food and such. What I did mainly was, during the week I worked at the embassy there. I was placed in the economic section, and my academic interest is in economic development. So one of the things that's really nice about the program is that they realize since the interns are unpaid, it's not like they're trying to get as much work out of you as possible. I believe they actually see it more as a recruiting tool for students to kind of show them what it might be like working as a diplomat for the Department of State. So I got to basically tell them what I was interested in and then formulate some projects based on that. My main project was looking at international lending from groups such as the World Bank, International Finance Corporation, and the Inter-American Development Bank was the third one I looked at. So I was kind of looking at their lending portfolios and really creating a profile for each of these three institutions to give the U.S. Embassy there more information about what these banks were doing and how they were interacting with the government. So it was kind of cool just to get to meet with people from the World Bank and the IFC and really talk about what they're doing and learn about the things that I actually learned about in class and see that in action. And outside of that, one of the things that's nice is they kind of let you just decide what you're going to do, and if you ask to do something, it's likely that you'll be able to. Another project that I got to go on that was in the making when I got there was related to sea turtles, and a marine biologist who was coming into Nicaragua to do a project there, and my boss was moving on to Malawi during my internship, so once he left I was kind of in charge of coordinating this project with the marine biologist, and I actually got to go out to the field with him to see them put the satellite tags on the turtles, which was very exciting and cool. And I also, since I'm interested in development, basically the way that it works at the embassy in Nicaragua is that there's the Department of State building, and right next to it is the U.S. Agency for International Development, and they work pretty closely, and that's the way it really works around the world, I believe. So I just kind of asked if I could do a few projects with them, and got to travel out to the eastern coast of the country to conduct a data quality analysis project, looking at one of their projects out there that they have going on. So that was pretty cool. It wasn't like I was doing most of the work there, but just to be able to witness that and be a part of it was really exciting, and I was glad that they gave me the leeway to do that. In terms of the language, I came in kind of thinking I knew more Spanish than I was actually able to use. My level is conversational, so I didn't really feel comfortable using it in a professional setting, but since I was working at the embassy every day, I didn't need to, since the language spoken there is English. And then outside of that, there were a few conferences I went to where I could hear and read and converse in Spanish, and that was completely fine. But in most of my day-to-day work, it was in English. And then I got to read and build up my Spanish skills throughout the week, and then also on the weekend was when I traveled a lot around the country and really got to speak to people and use my Spanish. So that brings me to another point about what it's like working as an intern at the Department of State, is that the way that I really got to see the country and get outside of Managua was on the weekends, just through different trips. There were 2 other interns working there at the time, and just a lot of other young people there, and families also that are working at the embassy, or different diplomats from the U.S. and other countries that are really interested in exploring and doing exciting things like that, and always open to letting a student like myself come along. So I got to, every weekend, go to climb volcanoes and go to the beach and things like that. So that was really cool. In terms of advice, I would just say, I guess, set your sights high, and just be willing to ask people about any opportunities, even if it's not a set program per se, and just kind of get out there and go for it. The way that you apply for Department of State internships is all online through USA Jobs is the website. The application is pretty straightforward, kind of long, but nothing too complicated. For summer internships, it was due on November 3rd, I believe, so that's already passed, but I would encourage you to look at it for possibly the fall or summer after that. It's probably I'd say the safest way to see a developing country and live in a developing country, just because the U.S. government really knows what's going on there and has a strong base there of employees and knows how to look out for them. And just in general, it's a pretty solid program that really knows how to take care of their interns, so I was appreciative of that.
The program I'll talk to you about, Amigos de las Americas, to me is very much like interning, but also doing service. I myself was in this program, but I'll refer more to the experience of my daughter, who went more recently. I also was in Nicaragua. Somoza was still in power. The Sandinistas were beginning to sort of rear their head. It was a very exciting time to be in Nicaragua. I was in Somoza, Madrid, near the northern border with Honduras, and I was doing medical work. And then the year prior to that, I was in Puerto Asís, Putumayo, in the southern territory of Colombia that borders Ecuador, along one of the tributaries of the Amazon. So Amigos is kind of the X Games of this stuff. You won't likely be in an urban center. You'll be in a more rural setting, and really exciting volunteer opportunities are offered through the program. So Amigos de las Americas has withstood the test of time. It's been around almost as long as the Peace Corps, almost 50 years. So it's established, it's respected, a huge network of alumni out there that later on can assist you in finding jobs if you want to utilize their positions to help you find jobs. They're there and willing. All right, so I said I would mention my daughter's program because it's I'll answer the questions with regards to her program since it's more recent. All right, so the program my daughter did was in San Pedro, Paraguay. She went down to be involved in a community-based initiative with Amigos in cooperation with the Peace Corps and an organization called Plan, a nonprofit. You might have heard of Plan in Central America, a nonprofit organization that works with community development. The Peace Corps was involved in projects to eliminate deforestation, and so the Amigos were building fuel-efficient adobe stoves in their communities, but with the community members, so in conjunction with them. Bill asked me to mention a little bit about my philosophy on service and finding a service project, and Amigos, the way I just described what she was doing, to me is something very important. It's a community-based activity. I'm not a big fan of service organizations that will plop you in the middle of a nonprofit organization where you're working directly with people. If it's a context like, we're here telling you how to do this, you know what I mean? Instead, you really want to look for an organization that respects the culture, the local culture, has you working with an existing organization that understands the needs of the community, where you're not perceived as going in and telling somebody that you know how to do something better, but rather, you know, you're using the assets that exist in the community, and you're just in there to step in and work with the people there to assist in ways that you might be needed. So definitely look for an organization that has that philosophy. You should be asking questions like that before you commit to an opportunity. All right. I've had students come in and talk to me as an advisor about their disappointment with programs because everything sounded good, but they didn't know to ask those questions, and then they came back kind of feeling embarrassed. Like, well, we went in there and we taught English in a classroom, but I felt kind of embarrassed because I didn't feel like it had the proper context, and I felt like I was in there telling them they should know my language instead of me knowing theirs. So if you do the right research ahead of time and you pick the right kind of organization, you'll be doing it in the right way. Okay, so I'm supposed to talk about the living arrangements. Amy lived with a family in a 2-room hut. It was a small subsistence farm. She slept on a cot with a mosquito net over her. And this was part of a Guarani community that was about 30 miles, no, probably more about 40 or 50 miles away from Asunción, the capital. She had 2 partners from the program, each of which lived in a separate host family and a separate subsistence farm. And they had the information for how to contact someone in case of an emergency, and they were in contact with the Peace Corps volunteer that was in their community, so if there were an emergency, there was a way they could get help. But other than that, one representative of Amigos came through town about once a week to see how things were going. So you're very independent. That's what I meant about it being kind of the X Games of volunteer service. You really get a chance to test your leadership skills and to be reliant on yourself. It's a wonderful opportunity. Amigos always puts students in pairs or perhaps trios in the communities, and they also have these students have separate homestays. Okay, so I mentioned what she did. She built adobe stoves. These were using bricks that were available locally, and it was building them with community members. The community itself had determined which 10 families would receive the stoves during the 5-week program period that Amy was there. So the community had assessed the needs and had made those important decisions. The local youth group was involved, and other people were involved in helping to build the stoves so that the stoves would continue to be built after the Amigos went home for the summer. Other projects that Amigos is involved in, they're throughout Latin America. They range from things that are almost humanities, like there was a group last year that, and one of our U of M students was the director of that program. I met him at the Overseas Opportunities Fair. He came out of the woodwork. It was awesome. It was a program where the Amigos went in and worked with members of the local youth group to document the experience of their elders. And so they were using digital photography and video cameras, and then with the youth group they created a presentation and display of the artwork, the songs, the stories. So again, it wasn't them going in saying, we're going to document your old people's lives, but rather Amigos working with young people to document their own grandparents' and aunts and uncles' experiences. Really awesome. And you have all kinds of projects in the middle, environmental projects, tagging sea turtles, all kinds of projects go on. And you can look at all of them and decide which one fits your needs, and you can apply to the one that you want. Money, you pay $4,000 to participate in the program, and it would last from 5 to 8 weeks, depending on the one you choose. Regardless of where you go, the cost is the same, and the cost includes the price of your airfare to the site, which to Paraguay was probably about $1,300, and that was included in the $4,000. There's nothing else to spend money on while you're down there, really. So take $50 for spending money, and you're probably good to go. You bring back a lot of souvenirs for that from most of the places you'd be working with Amigos. Okay, languages. She used her Spanish to talk to one of the 6 children in her host family who herself had studied Spanish in school, and the 2 of them used their Spanish as a second language as a bridge between English and Guarani. So it's pretty neat. But most of the Amigos projects are in Spanish language context, so you would use your Spanish. And Amy picked up some Guarani, which was pretty cool. All right, do I have advice for students? I think I've already doled out quite a bit. But I'm going to have to take off a little bit before 5 because I'm in a van pool, but you have my email address. I'm right over there in LSA Angel Hall Advising, so if you have any questions about it, I'll leave some of these brochures here, and Bill can keep some of them, and you know, feel free to get in touch with me. I'll be glad to put you in touch with those other U of M students that have done Amigos, so you can get that student-to-student advice as well. All right?
Hi everyone, my name is Robin. I'm a graduate of U of M, specifically from the residential college, and now I'm still on campus. I work for the Michigan Community Scholars Program through an AmeriCorps position.
That's where we know each other. Okay, I was like, her name.
I directly supervise Amy, who went to Paraguay, and she is a fabulous student. She must have picked up wonderful service-oriented goals while she was abroad. So my position was going to Argentina. I volunteered down there. I had done the Global Intercultural Exchange for undergrads here at GIU during my sophomore year and loved that experience, but for my junior year I wanted something a little more independent. So I worked with Bill and Kelly here to find an organization that was legitimate, that could provide me with some support while I was abroad, but I was really looking for something that I could take more initiative on my own. So I went to Cordoba, Argentina, which is not quite as large as Buenos Aires. It's a little more, a little smaller city. And I didn't live in Cordoba. I worked there. I lived in a little village outside. And I stayed with a host family, a mother who had 3 children, and I was the only volunteer in that family. but I did know of volunteers who were in nearby villages that I could get to by bus. I didn't hang out with the other volunteers a whole lot because I was there in the early part of the summer and more of the volunteers came during the later part of the summer. But I almost appreciated that more because I didn't want to go with a group of Americans necessarily. I really wanted to interact with more of the community members. So the program that I did, Projects Abroad, is probably the most flexible organization that I've ever worked with. They're in over 40 different countries. They offer volunteer opportunities in education, healthcare, business, the arts, journalism, environmental science. Whatever you want to study, they can find something for you. They have a lot of existing organizations, community-based organizations that they partner with. And if you suggest something that they haven't already worked with, they're very willing to find another organization for you. All of the people who work in the countries are native people of that city, so they have tons of networks and tons of contacts down there. So I ended up working at an after-school program for languages. The interesting thing about Argentina is that it's very multicultural. There is all of the native Argentinian culture as well as a lot of European culture as well. So everyone that I met down there spoke Spanish and French and German and English, and they just loved languages, which I found very refreshing. Americans don't tend to appreciate foreign language as much as people do in other countries. So the school that I taught at was, like I said, an after-school institute, so I worked with first graders through adults, and they would come to me after a full day of being in regular school, and they would still be enthusiastic about learning another language, which I found very exciting. And I was more of an American culture assistant as opposed to just instructing them on grammar and the basics and things like that. The adults were probably my favorite group because they were just so excited to learn about all of the culture that was happening in America, and we would hang out on Friday nights and drink mate, which is it's like the local Starbucks basically. Everyone walks around with a little pot of mate. So it was a wonderful way for me to really immerse with the community there, and they would invite me over to dinner at their houses afterward. I had studied Spanish since 5th grade, and then I studied through high school all the way through college. I did the intensive immersion program in Spanish in the residential college, so that really helped me improve my speaking skills, which is harder to get if you're taking just lecture-based classes. So I felt really prepared in my Spanish, but then when I got to Argentina, I realized that the specific city I was staying in is most famous for its rather convoluted accent and pronunciation. So I fortunately was living with a woman who works for Projects Abroad, my organization, as a Spanish teacher. So I was able to just sit with her in the evenings or in the morning before I went to work, and she would tell me all the details about, this is the vocabulary that you use here. You would never use this word. Or it took me a while to get the pronunciation. There's a lot of zh's instead of the typical way you would pronounce things. And so I really appreciated having all of that instruction so that I didn't make a fool of myself speaking American Spanish when I was down there. And the people in general really appreciated when I did use the language. And obviously I was not perfect in the way that I spoke, but they were so impressed that I came all the way from the Midwest. I'm from Chicago, and they're like, oh my goodness, how did you find out about us? And they were so glad that I was there and speaking their language, and I loved that. I spoke Spanish all the time, and I missed it horribly when I came home. So that was a great experience. I met a few other volunteers who were there from other countries, but like I said, I spent most of my time just exploring on my own on the weekends. I took the bus to pretty much every town that was within reach. Let's see. And Projects Abroad was really helpful in the sense that they took care of any unexpected needs that came up while I was there. I chose the organization because it provided me with all of the basics and all of the essentials, but they didn't really charge for anything extra, so I would say they were kind of in the medium price range, and I did a lot of research on different organizations before I went. And it turns out I was there during the height of the swine flu epidemic, and while I did not come down with swine flu, I did develop a cold right before I was supposed to travel back home. And so getting back into the country would have been quite a challenge if I didn't have any kind of documentation that I didn't actually have swine flu. So I contacted Projects Abroad before I left, and they took me to a very nice clinic, and I met with a physician who wrote me a certification that said she doesn't have swine flu. So I could get back through the airport, come back home, and they didn't charge me anything extra for the clinic visit, and it was all taken care of by Projects Abroad. And I still do a lot of outreach work for them. They keep in contact with their alumni very well. I held a table for them at the International Opportunities Fair, and I do recruitment for them, putting up flyers, and you can write stories for their website and get paid to do that. So there's a huge network, and again, it is kind of limitless in the number of opportunities they provide. So yeah, in terms of advice, I would say definitely explore your options and get a sense of what you're comfortable doing, but also challenge yourself a little bit as well. You don't want to jump right into a situation that's going to overwhelm you so much that you're not going to be able to soak up as much as you possibly could, but you should push yourself a little bit. Step outside your comfort zone and do use the language, because you will gain a lot from it and the local people will really appreciate it.
Again, I'm Najnaoui, and I'm kind of the anomaly here at the end of this presentation, because I'm not talking about interning or volunteering. I'm talking about teaching English in general in Spain. I spent a year in Castellón, Spain, teaching English through the Fulbright program. And so I'm just going to give kind of a general overview of what teaching is like in Spain. Robin talked a little bit about it in Argentina, and there's a lot of similarities. So most people who go to teach English in Spain, whether it's for a full year or for a semester or for a summer, for example, their role will be kind of a English language assistant in a classroom. So you'll always be paired with you know, another teacher, usually in a public school. There's a lot of demand for, you know, these assistants in recent years, especially because a lot of public schools in Madrid have started a new bilingual program where they teach English and Spanish to their students. And I was actually in Valencia, which had just started, the Valencian community, which had just started a new trilingual program. And it's starting to grow and grow, and as it grows, they need more, they're looking for more native English speakers. So the basic requirement is that you speak English. You don't need any experience in teaching, obviously it helps. And you don't even need to know a lot of Spanish, to be honest. In the classroom, at my job, I was speaking English almost all the time, because that's your role with the kids. You're supposed to be speaking English. And then it turns out, at least in my experience, a lot of the teachers are really looking to practice their English too. So they'll really they'll kind of seek you out at lunchtime or at break time to practice their English with you. I had done the study abroad thing before, so I was very comfortable with Spanish, and was able to, you know, improve it there just by meeting people and kind of I would eat lunch with a lot of the professors and we'd fall back into Spanish and that kind of thing. One thing that I think is important about knowing, or to know about teaching in public schools in Spain is there's a lot of cultural differences in the style of teaching. So one huge difference that I saw was that there's like zero discipline. So the kids will just be like yelling and crazy, and you're like, what is this teacher doing? Why isn't she like telling them to be quiet or putting this kid in the corner? And interestingly, when there is discipline, it seems super harsh. So this didn't happen in my school, but one of my friends, another English assistant, told me one teacher taped a kid to a chair. Okay, so you're just, so it's like there's nothing, or it's like really, you know, really strict. So that was one thing I had to kind of get accustomed to. Another thing that I really had to get used to was the flexibility of everything, because I'm sure you know this from being in Spain, but the like motto there for everything in life is no pasa nada. Like, it doesn't matter, you know, don't worry about it, no pasa nada, you know, we'll figure this out, just relax. So that for me was something that I really had to get used to. Again, I had studied in Spain before, so I kind of had a feel for that, those kind of attitudes, but I had never worked, you know, in a professional setting, so that was something I really had to get used to. So I would say my biggest piece of advice, and I think for any of these volunteer opportunities or internships or jobs, is to be really flexible and to understand that there's going to be cultural differences, and you might go in with goals and come out with something totally different. And then I just wanted to add on also, and other people can speak to this in other countries if they'd like to, but when you are abroad in a Spanish-speaking country, and I'm just going to talk about Spain for now, but a lot of times you'll make connections and you'll form, you know, friendships, and other opportunities for work will arise. And these are often not legal opportunities. You know, you're being paid under the table like you would here babysitting or tutoring or something like that. But I got a lot of jobs tutoring children after school in English, nannying, things like that. Gabrielle and I were talking, it's kind of like the soccer moms of Spain who want you to teach their kids English. And then another really unique opportunity that I had was I worked for 2 summers in a hostel in Granada, Spain, because they really look for English speakers, because most of the clientele are Australian or American or English, or, you know, Italian but don't speak Spanish and speak English better. So those are kind of opportunities that arise once you're in the country. I wouldn't recommend going to a country and assuming you're going to find that opportunity, but you might find that after spending a semester abroad, or after spending a summer abroad, some opportunity like that arises, and it's a really unique experience. Those were some of my most unique experiences in Spain, were those kind of work, from making those kinds of social connections.
Oh, about the teaching English in Spain, is the only way to do that through Fulbright?
Oh, no. There's other opportunities. One thing I also want to mention is in our International Center right across the hall, we have a Teaching Abroad Without Certification handout. So after the meeting, if you'd like to stop by, I can give you one of those. Honestly, the opportunities for teaching in Spain are pretty limited. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 programs. But we can talk about that after the meeting. I'll show you that handout. Anyone else? Any general questions? Mm-hmm.
I do. For the internships, how selective are they?
Yeah, I mean, the application process, wasn't that difficult. It was, it was like a one-page essay in Spanish of why you want to go, and then like a letter of recommendation from a Spanish teacher. And going into it, I was worried, if I'm gonna make it in or not, and I don't know how big the competition was because I luckily made it in. But I mean, I feel like they're pretty accepting. They're really about trying to give as many people the experience as possible, and so applying, I feel pretty confident to most programs because they are, they're trying to give the experience to as many people as possible.
I don't even really know for mine, just because I only applied myself. But I had 2 friends that also applied and didn't get it, so I assume that it is at least partially competitive. But someone from the International Center, or we also have a diplomat in residence here on campus that works at the Ford School, who works with a lot of applicants, so he might be able to let you know a little better with that.
If you'd like to be involved with Amigos, I can guarantee you you'll be able to go, and probably on the project that you'd like to do, because they would be very interested in students of the caliber of University of Michigan students. There's something I need to also mention that I didn't. This is a program that's also open to high school students. So you need to know if you were to do it, you would be there with high school students. My daughter was in high school when she did it. But it doesn't mean that you can't do it as a college student. And Amigos is smart enough. The project directors that are down there before the students arrive, they are themselves college students. Like my daughter's project director had just finished a stint with Teach for America and was getting ready to go to the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Her route director that came through on a cart once a week, a donkey and cart, had just graduated with her master's in education from Harvard. So you're there with, pretty amazing students as the leaders, and the next year you go back and you go for free the next year, and you then are one of the leaders. But anyway, I'm sure you would be able to be accepted, and if they were to put you on a project knowing, when they put you on a project knowing you're a college student, they'll put you on a project that will challenge you even more than some of the other projects might challenge one of the high school students. And you will not be babysitting high school students, and these are no ordinary high school students either. The program kind of self-selects for some rather interesting people. So yeah, but you could do it. Last May, I got an email from Amigos saying they still had a few spaces in some of their programs, and you do your training online, and you can do it at your own pace. So even as late as May, they had a few openings in some of the programs, and we sent an announcement out, and they did get, I think, a few U of M students that were interested that late that didn't already have something lined up for the summer, and it was a real, godsend that all of a sudden this opportunity at the last minute was there to do something like this.
Projects abroad I don't think is particularly competitive. They will take pretty much everyone from what I understand. And they'll only request an interview if they see something alarming on your application, which I don't imagine would come to you guys.
Maybe